Before the world witnessed the dusty paths of Galilee or the miracles that would echo through ages, there existed a soul of remarkable depth, a soul journeying through lifetimes beyond human memory. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, revealed through his readings that the being known to history as Jesus did not arrive fully formed in a single incarnation. Instead, this soul had prepared through countless experiences, learning lessons, embracing challenges, and cultivating an understanding of both human suffering and divine purpose. Imagine a river flowing through valleys and mountains, each bend shaping its course, each obstacle enriching its depth. In much the same way, this soul had traversed the tapestry of human history long before the manger in Bethlehem or the sermons upon Galilean hills. From early hints within Cayce's records, it becomes clear that Jesus' earthly life was the culmination of spiritual refinement. Before his well-known ministry, before the crowds and the teachings, there existed preparation in realms invisible, a maturation of essence that cannot be captured merely by historical accounts. Each incarnation was a step toward the balance of human and divine, each trial an exercise in perfecting empathy, patience, and the capacity for unconditional love. It is a humbling thought. The one whose name has been etched into the fabric of faith across centuries had walked, learned, and grown in ways far beyond the stories recorded in books. The readings suggest a progression of consciousness, where this soul experienced the human condition in varied forms, from roles of leadership to those of humility, learning the nuances of emotion, morality, and the interconnectedness of life. Imagine Jesus not only in the familiar figure of the carpenter's son, but also in lives less known, wandering the landscapes of human possibility, encountering suffering and joy, shaping character and cultivating wisdom. Cayce's insights guide us to see beyond linear time, understanding that spiritual evolution transcends a single lifetime. It is a continuum of awareness, a preparation for a mission that would resonate through eternity. And so, when we meet the historical Jesus, it is with the recognition that his compassion, his teachings, and his choices are rooted in millennia of experiential learning. The miracles that seem astounding were not mere displays of supernatural power. They were expressions of perfected understanding, reflections of a soul deeply attuned to the divine flow. The parables he shared were distilled wisdom, not merely clever narratives, but insights honed over lifetimes, designed to awaken hearts to universal truths. Cayce emphasizes that such depth of preparation is a reminder. Every soul in its journey carries lessons across time, readying itself for the roles it will fulfill in the tapestry of existence. The early years of this soul's final incarnation were marked by subtle awakenings. Even as a child, signs of spiritual perception, innate wisdom, and a connection to the divine were evident. Cayce's readings illuminate moments of curiosity, moments of reflection, and quiet understanding that foreshadow the later ministry. This is not a story of sudden enlightenment, but of a lifetime of readiness manifesting visibly in the child of Nazareth. It invites us to consider our own paths. How often do the seeds of our deepest potential lie quietly, waiting for the right conditions to unfold? The story opens with an invitation to contemplate the nature of love, service, and purpose. Jesus' soul, as Cayce portrays it, embodies the possibility of integrating human experience with divine insight. It suggests that our capacity for empathy, for selfless action, and for insight is not accidental, but the fruit of accumulated learning, stretching across time and space. Every challenge, every moment of choice, contributes to the refinement of character. ultimately preparing a soul to act as a beacon of light. In this, we find the first lesson. Greatness is not merely in deeds witnessed by the world, but in the quiet, persistent cultivation of the inner life. As the story unfolds, we follow the contours of this extraordinary soul, tracing the path from unseen realms to the dusty streets of Judea. Cayce's readings paint a picture of intention and preparation, a continuity that bridges the human and the divine. The child who would become the teacher, the healer, and the exemplar of love is revealed as a culmination of lifetimes, each leaving imprints of wisdom and compassion. And through this lens, the familiar phrases and teachings we know, the command to love, the emphasis on forgiveness, the invitation to live authentically, take on new depth. They are not isolated instructions, but the manifestation of a soul perfected through experience. This section invites reflection on the continuity of consciousness, the depth of preparation, and the remarkable patience inherent in spiritual evolution. Cayce's revelations challenge us to broaden our understanding of history and divinity, to see Jesus not only as a figure of faith, but as an exemplar of a soul journey perfected. The journey ahead will explore the formative influences, human experiences, and divine integration that defined his mission. Each story, each parable, each action was a culmination of this profound preparation, offering guidance to humanity in ways both visible and subtle. The soul's journey teaches that the extraordinary often emerges from persistent, invisible preparation, that every life contributes to the potential for love realized fully, and that the lessons of millennia converge in a single, luminous presence. As we continue, we will follow the thread of this preparation into the formative years of his final earthly life, observing the early stirrings of wisdom and the seeds of compassion that would blossom for all humanity. The early years in Nazareth, though modest in appearance, were rich in subtle learning and quiet observation. Cayce's readings suggest that Jesus' interactions with family, neighbors, and the environment around him were imbued with lessons from prior experiences. It was a period where the cumulative wisdom of past lives began to merge seamlessly with his current incarnation, forming the basis for discernment, empathy, and spiritual insight. He observed the patterns of human behavior, the struggles, the joys, and the frailties of people, integrating these observations into an understanding that would later inform every teaching, every gesture of compassion, and every decision made in his ministry. This soul, aware in ways far beyond ordinary children, displayed a natural resonance with principles of fairness, kindness, and discernment. Even in seemingly ordinary situations, helping a sibling, assisting a neighbor, listening attentively to someone in distress, these were exercises in applied love, the manifestation of lessons earned over countless lives. Cayce emphasizes that such ordinary moments were as vital as extraordinary acts. They allowed the soul to navigate the nuances of human emotion, to refine the ability to respond with patience, and to cultivate an authentic connection with those around him. The ordinary became a crucible for the extraordinary, and the child of Nazareth was learning the sacred rhythm of service and presence. Education in this period extended beyond formal learning. Conversations with elders, moments of solitude in nature, and attentive engagement in daily chores became vehicles for absorbing wisdom and cultivating insight. The awareness of interconnectedness, the recognition that every action ripples through the web of existence, began to crystallize in his consciousness. Here, Cayce's insights highlight a critical principle. The formation of spiritual authority does not arise merely from study or doctrine, but through lived experience and careful observation of life's moral and ethical dimensions. The merging of inherited wisdom and lived reality laid the groundwork for a ministry that would resonate across generations. By observing human vulnerability, Jesus developed an acute empathy that transcended superficial sympathy. Cayce notes that he perceived not only the surface emotions of those he encountered, but also the underlying struggles, the fears, and the aspirations hidden within their hearts. This depth of perception allowed him to respond with precision, offering encouragement, guidance, or correction in a manner that honored the dignity of each individual. The skill of perceiving truth beneath appearances was cultivated long before his public ministry, a reflection of the soul's preparation and the harmonization of human awareness with divine insight. At the same time, there was an awakening to the divine dimension of his own being. Cayce's readings reveal that Jesus, even as a youth, experienced moments of profound spiritual awareness, a recognition that his essence was intimately connected with the source of all life. These moments were not abstract notions, but tangible experiences, insights, intuitions, and a sense of guidance that transcended logic. The balance between the human and divine began to take form. He was learning to act with integrity, to honor the needs of others, and to discern the underlying spiritual currents that shape existence. Interactions within the community offered lessons in humility, patience, and self-restraint. Cayce suggests that even minor conflicts, misunderstandings, or acts of injustice were opportunities for the young Jesus to exercise restraint, forgiveness, and understanding. Each encounter was a practice in embodying the principles he would later teach: love without condition, service without expectation, and forgiveness as an expression of divine harmony. The capacity to meet adversity without retaliation, to act decisively yet compassionately, was honed in these early, often invisible experiences. Nature itself served as a silent teacher. Cayce emphasizes that Jesus' connection with the natural world allowed him to perceive patterns of harmony, cycles of growth, and the subtle intelligence of creation. The flowing of rivers, the growth of plants, the rhythm of the seasons, all became metaphors for the divine order and the unfolding of life's spiritual lessons. These observations nurtured a deep sense of patience, trust, and rhythm, teaching him that the divine plan operates beyond human comprehension, but always with purpose and alignment. Family life offered both intimacy and instruction. The dynamics within his household mirrored universal truths: the importance of respect, cooperation, and the careful navigation of human emotions. Cayce notes that these experiences reinforce the understanding that the spiritual path is lived through relationships, that mastery of self and mastery of interaction with others are inseparable. The young soul absorbed these teachings not as abstract lessons, but as lived reality, preparing the heart for leadership, guidance, and the expression of divine love in human form. Through these early experiences, we begin to see the slow, deliberate integration of the human and divine aspects of Jesus' being. Every interaction, every observation, every reflection contributed to the formation of a balanced, empathetic, and spiritually aware consciousness. Cayce portrays this period as foundational, a quiet but potent training ground for the momentous ministry ahead. It reminds us that greatness in spiritual leadership often grows in silence, nurtured by attentive awareness, compassion, and the patient cultivation of understanding. By the end of this phase, the child had begun to demonstrate a remarkable equilibrium of thought, emotion, and intuition. These qualities, formed through a combination of inherited soul wisdom, community experience, and spiritual attunement, foreshadowed the profound influence he would exert. Cayce's insights encourage us to recognize that preparation, reflection, and subtle, consistent practice are the scaffolding for the expression of divine purpose. As we move forward, the story will trace how these foundations set the stage for his early public encounters, shaping both his actions and the interpretation of his mission. The transition from the quiet life in Nazareth to the first stirrings of public presence marked a subtle yet profound shift in the trajectory of Jesus' journey. Cayce's readings illuminate that even before the formal onset of his ministry, the young man was drawn to moments where human suffering, moral confusion, and spiritual longing converged. These encounters were more than coincidences. They were orchestrated experiences, designed to reveal both the challenges of human existence and the capacity of a spiritually attuned soul to respond with wisdom and compassion. In markets, streets, and homes, he observed the nuanced interplay of social hierarchies, familial obligations, and communal tensions. Every act of kindness he witnessed or participated in was recorded within the internal framework of understanding, each incident a layer in the tapestry of insight he carried forward. Cayce emphasizes that this period was not merely preparatory, it was formative, teaching discernment in the midst of complex social dynamics, sensitivity to the unspoken needs of others, and the ability to inspire change without confrontation. The young Jesus was already practicing what would later be articulated as living truthfully in alignment with divine law. Spiritual awareness deepened through meditation, prayer, and contemplation, which Cayce notes were habitual even before the baptismal events described in traditional accounts. These practices connected him to the source, reinforcing the integration of his human experience with the divine essence within. Moments of solitude along the hills, by flowing streams, or beneath the vast expanse of the sky became laboratories for spiritual insight. He reflected on the nature of suffering, the impermanence of worldly concerns, and the eternal dimensions of the soul, cultivating an intuitive comprehension that surpassed conventional learning. These reflections enabled him to perceive the layers of human experience with clarity, recognizing patterns of behavior, motivations, and the underlying struggles that shape choices. Cayce also recounts that Jesus displayed an early aptitude for discernment and moral leadership among his peers and family members. He offered guidance, often subtly, modeling patience, humility, and integrity. These early exercises in influence and counsel were not for personal gain, but as expressions of a soul committed to serving higher principles. Even when misunderstood or resisted, his responses exemplified the capacity to maintain equanimity, uphold ethical standards, and convey love as a transformative force. Significant attention was given to understanding human emotions, a domain in which Cayce highlights his exceptional sensitivity. Jesus was attuned to fear, anxiety, hope, and longing, perceiving the currents of feeling that flowed beneath words and gestures. This empathy became the foundation for later miracles and teachings. It was through deep recognition of human need that his responses achieved their transformative power. Each observation, each interaction, was a practice in aligning action with understanding, a rehearsal for the complex moral and spiritual dilemmas he would face in public ministry. The readings also reveal that Jesus began to test the limits of his emerging abilities, both spiritually and socially. He encountered situations requiring courage, diplomacy, and discernment, each presenting a choice between the instinctive response of self-interest and the deliberate action guided by compassion. Cayce emphasizes that these moments were critical for developing mastery over the impulses and distractions inherent in human life. The soul was learning to act decisively without attachment, to embody the principles of service, and to maintain inner alignment even when external circumstances were challenging. Education continued in both formal and informal settings. Scholars, elders, and teachers contributed fragments of knowledge that his soul synthesized into a holistic understanding. Cayce notes that he often absorbed teachings intuitively, integrating them with prior life experience and internal moral compass, creating a personalized map of spiritual and ethical understanding. This synthesis enabled him to approach problems creatively, to articulate complex truths in accessible ways, and to respond with insight that bridged the human and divine. Cayce highlights that dreams and visions played a key role during this stage. They were reflective, instructional, and sometimes foretelling, offering glimpses into human potential and the broader implications of moral choices. Such experiences cultivated foresight, the ability to perceive consequences, and the sensitivity to align actions with higher purpose. These internal experiences, combined with external observation, prepared Jesus for the public demonstration of authority, compassion, and teaching that would soon define his life. The gradual emergence from private preparation to public engagement underscores the meticulous planning inherent in the soul's journey. Cayce's readings portray Jesus' early public interactions as deliberate exercises in balance, the harmonization of insight with humility, power with service, and knowledge with empathy. These formative encounters exemplify the careful calibration of a life meant to guide humanity through example, and to reveal that divine love is most potent when expressed through conscious, compassionate action. As this phase closes, the groundwork for the eventual ministry is unmistakable. The blend of lived experience, spiritual practice, and refined perception shaped a consciousness capable of profound influence. Cayce reminds us that preparation often unfolds quietly, away from recognition or acclaim, and that true mastery arises from sustained engagement with life's subtleties. This sets the stage for his initial public teachings, where the wisdom of countless lifetimes coalesces into expressions of love, guidance, and transformative presence. The baptism in the Jordan River, as described in the Gospels, holds a deeper significance in Cayce's readings, a convergence point where human readiness meets divine purpose. Jesus' immersion in the waters was more than a ritualistic act. It symbolized the culmination of preparatory lifetimes, a conscious alignment with the divine blueprint that he had been cultivating across millennia. In this sacred act, the veil between the seen and unseen seemed to thin, revealing the profound interplay between human effort and spiritual guidance. Cayce elaborates that the voice from the heavens, "This is my beloved Son," was not merely a proclamation to those present, but an acknowledgement within the soul itself. Across previous incarnations, the essence of this soul had striven to reconcile human limitation with divine expression, and in that moment, a recognition crystallized. The self, fully realized in harmony with the source, is capable of both profound humility and transformative authority. It was a turning point where preparation met destiny, where knowledge acquired in solitude became action in the world, and where spiritual maturity manifested in a form comprehensible to humanity. Immediately following this baptismal initiation, Jesus began to navigate the landscape of public ministry with deliberate intention. Cayce's readings suggest that every sermon, parable, and miracle was a carefully considered interaction, designed to awaken latent understanding in others without overwhelming their capacity to receive it. The wisdom conveyed was layered, accessible to the common listener, yet rich in depth for those prepared to discern its hidden truths. Jesus employed stories and actions as vessels, allowing divine principles to permeate the human consciousness subtly yet powerfully. The wilderness experience, a period of solitude and temptation, serves in Cayce's interpretation as both a test and a calibration. Here, the interplay between human desire and divine purpose was brought into stark relief. The trials were not external punishments, but mirrors reflecting inner tendencies, presenting choices that required mastery over ego, fear, and attachment. Each challenge strengthened his capacity for discernment, patience, and unwavering alignment with higher truth. Cayce underscores that the temptations illustrate the universal struggle of every soul, how the integration of human experience with divine intent is both the path and the test of spiritual evolution. During these formative public interactions, Jesus' understanding of human nature deepened in ways not always apparent to onlookers. He perceived the limitations of rigid dogma, the comforts of ritual detached from love, and the barriers erected by fear and misunderstanding. Cayce reveals that Jesus navigated these dynamics with subtlety, introducing truths in forms adaptable to each listener's readiness, demonstrating that spiritual guidance is most effective when it honors the recipient's current state while gently expanding awareness. Miracles in Cayce's readings are reframed not as displays of power for astonishment, but as manifestations of natural laws harmonized with divine intention. Healing, for instance, reflects the principle that the body, mind, and spirit operate as a unified system, responsive to consciousness aligned with love. By demonstrating what is possible when divine energy flows unhindered, Jesus offered a tangible glimpse into the potential latent in every individual. Each act carried multiple layers: a solution to immediate suffering, a model for faith in action, and a subtle lesson in the alignment of human will with higher will. Parables functioned similarly, encoding wisdom within narratives that spoke across cultural, temporal, and spiritual contexts. Cayce emphasizes that these stories, while simple on the surface, were rich repositories of universal principles: compassion, forgiveness, stewardship, and the recognition of inherent divine potential. By employing metaphor, Jesus enabled his audience to internalize lessons without confrontation, facilitating insight that grows gradually, nurtured by reflection and experience. This method mirrors the way souls accumulate understanding across lifetimes, assimilating truths in stages and integrating them into daily living. Interactions with disciples further illustrate the deliberate pedagogy of Jesus' ministry. Cayce notes that he carefully chose individuals whose experiences, temperaments, and aspirations aligned with specific teachings, allowing for personalized instruction while fostering communal support. The development of these relationships exemplifies the principle that spiritual evolution often occurs within networks of mutual encouragement, mentorship, and challenge, where diverse perspectives catalyze growth and insight. Throughout these activities, the recurring theme highlighted by Cayce is the integration of human and divine qualities. Jesus exemplified how awareness of divine essence does not negate human experience. Rather, it illuminates the pathway through ordinary challenges, ethical dilemmas, and emotional turbulence. Every choice, every gesture, and every word serve to demonstrate that the divine presence within is actionable and relational, inviting humanity to recognize its own potential for love, wisdom, and unity. As the ministry unfolded, the teachings began to crystallize into a coherent body of insight, weaving together guidance for personal conduct, societal harmony, and spiritual evolution. Cayce underscores that understanding the context of prior lifetimes enriches comprehension. The wisdom imparted was not merely the product of recent preparation, but the culmination of countless experiences, each refining capacity for empathy, insight, and transformative action. This integrated awareness set the stage for the profound lessons of sacrifice, redemption, and service that would soon manifest in the later stages of his journey. The baptism and subsequent public ministry reveal that preparation and purpose converge to produce transformative presence. Through careful observation, disciplined practice, and intentional engagement, Jesus embodied the principles he would later articulate: love in action, wisdom in discernment, and humility in expression. Cayce reminds us that the external manifestations, miracles, parables, leadership, are the visible reflection of internal mastery cultivated over countless lifetimes. Each act and teaching resonates with the continuity of soul evolution, illustrating the potential within every human being to harmonize inner divinity with outer life. This phase concludes with the recognition that the public ministry, though extraordinary in form, is fundamentally an extension of internal development. The lessons learned in solitude, reflection, and early human interactions coalesce into acts that guide, heal, and inspire. The path forward will increasingly challenge the interplay of human limitations and divine insight, preparing for the ultimate expression of love and sacrifice that defines the life of Jesus. Cayce's reading suggests that witnessing these stages allows us to see not only historical events, but the enduring principles of spiritual growth and the transformative power of aligned consciousness. The teachings of Jesus, as recounted in Cayce's readings, reflect a depth of spiritual insight rarely grasped in its entirety. Each parable, each exhortation, and each act of service embodies layers of wisdom that transcend a single lifetime, revealing a soul seasoned through countless experiences. Cayce emphasizes that understanding the divine human synthesis in Jesus requires more than historical knowledge. It demands contemplation of the cumulative journey that shaped his consciousness and informed every decision, every interaction, every expression of love. Consider the Sermon on the Mount, a pivotal teaching moment where Jesus articulates principles that continue to guide spiritual seekers today. Cayce interprets these teachings as both practical guidance for ethical living and metaphysical instruction for aligning with divine law. When Jesus speaks of turning the other cheek, blessing those who persecute, and loving enemies, Cayce explains that these are not merely moral directives, but strategies for transforming consciousness. The soul, he notes, evolves by consistently choosing love over reaction, patience over impulse, and understanding over judgment. Principles that were honed through previous incarnations, where missteps, learning, and forgiveness laid the groundwork for mastery. Cayce's readings reveal that each miracle performed by Jesus carries symbolic resonance beyond immediate necessity. Healing the blind, for example, is both literal and metaphorical. The act demonstrates compassion in physical terms, while simultaneously illustrating the capacity of awakened consciousness to perceive truths obscured by ignorance or attachment. Across lifetimes, the soul that became Jesus had repeatedly encountered human limitation, both in self and others, learning patience, empathy, and the delicate balance required to guide without imposing. These experiences infused the miracles with a multi-dimensional significance, transforming them into living lessons on the power of divine love applied in tangible circumstances. Another critical facet is the depiction of Jesus' ethical and spiritual interactions with societal structures of his time. Cayce notes that his engagement with religious authorities, Roman governance, and community hierarchies was deliberate, illuminating the tension between rigid institutional dogma and the living expression of divine principle. By navigating these dynamics with wisdom and grace, Jesus modeled how the alignment of human action with divine intent requires discernment, courage, and the humility to act in accordance with higher truth, despite external pressures. The lessons extend beyond historical context, offering insight into how contemporary seekers might approach authority, tradition, and societal expectations while remaining grounded in love and integrity. Cayce also highlights the intimate, personal dimensions of Jesus' ministry. His interactions with individuals, those seeking healing, guidance, or understanding, reflect an extraordinary capacity to perceive the internal state of each soul and respond with both empathy and clarity. These moments underscore the principle that spiritual mastery involves recognition of each person's journey, honoring free will, and providing support tailored to readiness and receptivity. Here we see the practical application of divine wisdom, love in action that respects the complexity and uniqueness of every being. The narrative of Jesus' path to the cross, central to Christian understanding, is enriched in Cayce's interpretations by the broader lens of past life experience. Each previous incarnation, each encounter with challenge or suffering, had refined the soul's ability to bear pain, respond with grace, and manifest unconditional love. The crucifixion, therefore, is not merely an historical event or a moment of martyrdom. It represents the culmination of spiritual preparation spanning lifetimes, a conscious embodiment of sacrifice as both teaching and demonstration of ultimate alignment with divine will. Cayce emphasizes that such an understanding does not diminish the historical reality, but expands its significance, offering insight into the continuity of soul evolution and the deliberate cultivation of love under trial. Furthermore, the resurrection, as Cayce explains, symbolizes the enduring principle that divine presence within the human form is not extinguished by physical limitation. It is an affirmation of continuity, renewal, and the triumph of love-infused consciousness over fear, suffering, and death. The resurrection is the visible articulation of a hidden truth cultivated through ages, that the integration of human experience and divine essence results in transformation and enlightenment. By reflecting upon this, we gain appreciation for the magnitude of the spiritual path, its challenges and its potential. Cayce also provides insight into the often overlooked aspect of Jesus' human vulnerabilities. Far from diminishing his divinity, his moments of doubt, fatigue, and emotional response illuminate the practical reality of divine human integration. Each human reaction is an opportunity for choice, for demonstrating alignment with divine principles even amid the most ordinary or trying circumstances. The teachings are therefore not abstract. They are grounded in lived experience, accessible to those willing to observe, reflect, and emulate the balance of love, discipline, and purpose. Through the lens of Cayce's readings, we come to understand that the life of Jesus is a dynamic, continuous lesson in soul development, not a static historical account. It invites each listener to consider their own journey, to recognize potential for growth, and to see the unfolding of human and divine collaboration within themselves. Every parable, miracle, and act of service becomes a mirror reflecting opportunities for awakening, compassion, and ethical action. By contemplating the breadth of preparation, the deliberate choices, and the consistent alignment with divine will across multiple lifetimes, we perceive that Jesus' example is not merely a distant ideal, but a model for attainable transformation. The lessons of his life, as interpreted by Cayce, challenge us to integrate understanding into daily living, to choose love and patience in moments of trial, and to recognize that spiritual evolution is a lifelong, multidimensional endeavor. As this reflection on teachings, miracles, and ethical engagement concludes, we are invited to transition toward the exploration of deeper dimensions. How the principles manifested by Jesus in tangible acts, combined with inner mastery, provide a blueprint for the practical application of love, service, and divine alignment in every life. The next segment will trace the specific ways his example illustrates the unification of human potential with divine purpose, preparing us for the ultimate lessons of sacrifice, transcendence, and enduring spiritual influence. The parables of Jesus, as recounted through Edgar Cayce's readings, form a subtle and profound map of spiritual development. Each story, carefully crafted, functions on multiple levels, inviting the listener to explore not only the literal narrative, but the deeper currents of consciousness that they reveal. The parable of the sower, for instance, is more than an agricultural metaphor. It is an instruction on receptivity, readiness, and the conditions necessary for spiritual seeds to flourish. Cayce explains that the seeds represent divine truths, and the soil symbolizes the preparedness of the human heart, shaped across many lifetimes by experiences, lessons, and trials. A soul encountering these truths must be fertile, open, and resilient, a quality honed through repeated incarnations of learning and unlearning. Cayce emphasizes that the parables operate as a layered teaching mechanism, blending narrative with moral and metaphysical insights. The Good Samaritan is not merely a lesson in social compassion, but a demonstration of transcendence over cultural biases and ingrained judgment. Jesus' choice of the Samaritan, a figure marginalized and often despised, reflects a conscious intention to expand human perception, to illuminate the universality of divine love, and to show that the capacity for compassion exists in every soul, regardless of external conditioning. Through Cayce's lens, we understand that these teachings are reflections of the spiritual maturation of Jesus' soul over successive lives, a soul attuned to the subtle energies of empathy, justice, and discernment. Miracles, too, are rich in symbolic meaning. Healing the lepers, calming storms, and feeding multitudes are demonstrations of a consciousness aligned with higher principles, capable of transforming limitation into possibility. Cayce notes that these acts are emblematic of the potential within each soul to manifest harmony, abundance, and healing when fully aligned with divine purpose. Each miracle is a crystallized moment where human action intersects with divine energy, showing that spiritual power is both practical and transformative, accessible through awareness, intention, and ethical alignment. Cayce also explores the dimension of Jesus' interactions with his disciples. These relationships were not only pedagogical, but also energetic. He nurtured qualities such as patience, discernment, humility, and courage within those around him, cultivating capacities that extended far beyond their immediate understanding. The disciples became conduits for the broader dissemination of divine principles, embodying in their own ways the teachings they absorbed. In this context, Jesus' guidance illustrates the importance of mentorship, example, and the subtle transmission of wisdom through lived presence rather than merely verbal instruction. Cayce emphasizes that these interactions were part of a cosmic design, reflecting the continuity of human and divine collaboration in shaping consciousness across generations. The readings also highlight Jesus' encounters with societal and religious authorities. Cayce notes that his dialogues and challenges with these structures were not confrontational for the sake of conflict, but intentional, aimed at revealing rigidity, dogma, and the limits of externally imposed authority. By acting in accordance with divine guidance, Jesus modeled a path of integrity, demonstrating that true alignment with spiritual truth often requires courage to stand apart from conventional norms. Each decision to act with compassion over conformity represents a template for ethical courage, showing how divine human synthesis manifests in real-world choices. Cayce's insights further illuminate the continuity of Jesus' awareness across lifetimes. Each decision, reaction, and teaching is understood as the culmination of extensive soul preparation. The depth of his empathy, the clarity of his moral vision, and the mastery of his inner self were not sudden achievements, but the outcome of an evolutionary process spanning countless incarnations. This perspective reframes the narrative of the Gospels as a living testament to the soul's capacity for refinement, discipline, and integration of divine attributes into tangible existence. In the context of his parables, Cayce underscores the importance of interpretation. Every listener is called to engage actively with the teachings, allowing the stories to resonate within personal experience and provoke inner reflection. The parables, like living mirrors, invite us to recognize our own patterns of fear, judgment, and limitation, while offering pathways toward greater love, understanding, and spiritual agency. This interactive quality transforms reading or listening into an experiential practice, a method by which consciousness expands incrementally through contemplation and application. Finally, the practical implications of Jesus' teachings, as viewed by Cayce, are profound. Beyond historical recounting, they function as guides for daily life. Loving one's neighbor, exercising forgiveness, and acting with integrity are not abstract ideals, but achievable expressions of an integrated human divine potential. Through them, individuals are encouraged to cultivate qualities that parallel the developmental arc of Jesus' own soul, embracing the journey of spiritual evolution as a lived experience. The essence of his teachings, therefore, is both timeless and universally accessible, transcending culture, geography, and temporal context. As we conclude this exploration of parables, discipleship, and the practical unfolding of divine principles, we prepare to examine the intricate interplay between Jesus' human struggles and the divine consciousness he exemplified. The next section will trace the subtle interweaving of vulnerability and transcendence, showing how even the most extraordinary life is anchored in relatable human experiences, yet radiates enduring spiritual truth. The life of Jesus, as revealed through Edgar Cayce's readings, illustrates a delicate balance between human vulnerability and divine awareness, showing that true spiritual mastery does not erase challenges, but transforms them into vehicles for growth. Cayce emphasizes that every struggle, doubt, or moment of uncertainty that Jesus faced was both deeply human and profoundly instructive. This duality, fully human yet fully divine, offers a paradigm for understanding the integration of spirit and flesh within the soul's journey. It is not a narrative of perfection imposed from above, but a demonstration that alignment with the divine is a lived process navigated amidst the full spectrum of human experience. Cayce details specific moments of inner contemplation and solitude, such as the periods Jesus spent in the wilderness in prayer or atop hills overlooking Galilee. These were not mere historical episodes, but essential stages in soul development. They reflect a conscious withdrawal from external noise to attune deeply to the inner voice of guidance, highlighting the spiritual practice of reflection as a tool for discernment and clarity. In these times, Jesus was shaping his understanding of purpose, reinforcing the lessons accumulated through prior lifetimes, and preparing for the demands of his public ministry. The pattern is familiar to any seeker. Solitude is not isolation, but an active engagement with higher awareness. The readings also illuminate the profound empathy Jesus carried toward those he encountered. Each healing, each word of comfort, and each act of inclusion arose from a wellspring of understanding cultivated across multiple lifetimes. Cayce notes that his sensitivity to human suffering was not incidental. It was the conscious expression of a soul seasoned by repeated experiences of hardship, rejection, and the quest for truth. Through these acts, he demonstrated that compassion is a practical manifestation of spiritual evolution. Every gesture, however small, was imbued with the energy of love that transcends temporality, echoing the principle that the human-divine interplay is active and experiential. Cayce further explores Jesus' confrontation with fear, both in himself and in others. The Gethsemane narrative, for example, is not merely a historical account of anguish. It is a vivid depiction of a soul negotiating the weight of responsibility, awareness of collective human suffering, and the impending path of sacrifice. Cayce interprets this moment as emblematic of the process by which divine purpose engages the human heart, requiring acceptance, courage, and the deliberate choice to embody love despite the potential for pain. It shows that true spiritual authority is inseparable from accountability and self-mastery. The interplay between miracles and human response is another dimension Cayce highlights. Each miraculous act, walking on water, calming storms, raising the dead, was both a demonstration of inner attunement and an invitation for others to expand their understanding of reality. Cayce explains that these events were not performed to impress, but to reveal the latent potential within every soul, the capacity to align perception with higher truths and to act as instruments of divine energy. Miracles in this context become mirrors of human possibility rather than isolated wonders, reinforcing the theme that divinity operates through, not apart from, human engagement. Cayce also reflects on Jesus' moral choices in daily life, underscoring the significance of seemingly ordinary decisions. The moments when he confronted hypocrisy, extended forgiveness, or served the marginalized exemplify a continuous ethical discernment that integrated compassion, justice, and wisdom. These choices illustrate how the path of spiritual development is woven into every action, reinforcing the notion that enlightenment is not separate from life, but embedded in the practical, relational, and ethical dimensions of human existence. Another layer explored is the relational dynamics Jesus navigated: familial, communal, and societal. Cayce emphasizes that his interactions with family, followers, and skeptics alike were stages for the application of divine principles. Patience, active listening, and adaptability were cultivated through these engagements, demonstrating that spiritual authority is relational as much as it is internal. Each encounter served as a microcosm for the larger cosmic pattern of teaching, learning, and energy exchange, reminding us that every relationship is an arena for conscious evolution. Cayce also highlights the rhythm of service and retreat in Jesus' life. The cycles of public ministry and private reflection form a template for harmonizing action with contemplation. By stepping back to integrate insight, Jesus maintained alignment with his higher purpose, offering a model for balancing external activity with internal attunement. This balance is crucial, Cayce notes, for any soul seeking to manifest divine attributes consistently, emphasizing that spiritual maturity requires cycles of engagement and renewal. Finally, this section underscores the principle that divine-human integration is ongoing, iterative, and deeply practical. Jesus' life, as Cayce interprets it, was a series of choices and reflections that illuminated the potential within each individual to cultivate awareness, compassion, and alignment with divine will. The narrative demonstrates that human challenges are not obstacles to divinity, but integral components of its expression, providing context, depth, and meaning to the soul's unfolding journey. As we prepare to explore the profound significance of Jesus' death and resurrection in the next section, we carry forward the understanding that vulnerability, reflection, and compassionate action are not only historical elements but enduring principles for contemporary spiritual practice. His journey reveals that the path to integration of human and divine aspects is both challenging and luminous, offering a timeless blueprint for seekers of all backgrounds. The culmination of Jesus' earthly journey, as revealed through Edgar Cayce's readings, centers on the intertwined themes of sacrifice, transformation, and the ultimate expression of love. Cayce presents the crucifixion not merely as a historical event, but as a multidimensional teaching moment for humanity. An illustration of how the highest spiritual principles are actualized through tangible human experience. In his final acts, Jesus embodies the profound convergence of purpose and presence, demonstrating that the fullness of divine potential is realized not in isolation, but through service, surrender, and unwavering alignment with higher truth. Cayce emphasizes that the crucifixion was the apex of a lifelong pattern of conscious choices, a life where every moment had been meticulously shaped by prior experiences across many lifetimes. Each encounter, each act of compassion, and each moral decision contributed to the maturity required for this ultimate expression. In this lens, the Passion of Christ is not merely an external story, but the manifestation of a soul that has cultivated perfect harmony between its human limitations and divine essence. This harmonization is what allowed Jesus to face suffering with clarity, dignity, and unwavering love, transforming pain into a medium of enlightenment for others. Miracles and parables throughout his life served as preparation for this ultimate act. Cayce explains that the stories of healing, the calmness in storms, and the ethical teachings were all threads in a tapestry that revealed the path of service and the depth of spiritual integration. Each miracle was a demonstration of alignment with divine law, and each parable contained layers of wisdom designed to activate the higher consciousness of those who were ready to receive it. These elements set the stage for understanding the crucifixion not simply as an event, but as the embodiment of divine purpose lived fully within human form. Cayce further illuminates the psychological and energetic dimensions of the crucifixion. The intense suffering, both physical and emotional, was a crucible for revealing the true nature of divine-human integration. Through this ordeal, Jesus demonstrated mastery over fear, attachment, and ego, offering a profound lesson that spiritual attainment is inseparable from the lived reality of struggle and the conscious choice to respond with love. The cross, in this interpretation, becomes a symbolic bridge between human suffering and transcendent awareness, inviting every individual to consider how adversity can be transformed into a vehicle for growth and compassion. The resurrection, as viewed by Cayce, is equally instructive. It is not solely a miraculous event of bodily restoration, but a vivid example of consciousness, transcending the limitations of the material plane. Cayce portrays it as a demonstration of how the soul, perfectly attuned to divine law, can navigate the boundaries between life and death, matter and spirit. This event communicates the profound truth that every soul carries within it: the potential to rise above limitations through love, service, and the consistent embodiment of higher principles. Resurrection, then, is as much a state of spiritual realization as it is a historical moment. Cayce also explores the ripple effects of Jesus' actions, emphasizing that the energy of love and sacrifice radiates outward across time and space, influencing consciousness far beyond the immediate historical context. The reading suggests that the crucifixion and resurrection were not isolated lessons for the people of that era alone, but templates for spiritual evolution accessible to all souls willing to embrace their inherent capacity for divine expression. This view encourages a deeper reflection on how personal actions, when aligned with truth and compassion, contribute to a collective awakening. The practical implications for contemporary life are profound. Cayce teaches that embodying Jesus' principles requires integrating courage, forgiveness, and selflessness into daily routines. It is not merely about emulating dramatic acts of sacrifice, but about expressing love consistently in small, intentional ways, through honesty, patience, service, and ethical decision-making. The readings challenge listeners to perceive their own lives as stages for practicing divine human integration, transforming ordinary experiences into opportunities for spiritual advancement. Moreover, Cayce underscores the significance of understanding Jesus' multi-lifetime preparation. Each lesson from past existences, each act of alignment, converged in the crucifixion to illustrate that spiritual mastery is cumulative, built over time, and expressed fully when human experience and divine insight converge. This perspective invites a re-evaluation of life's challenges as part of a broader continuum of growth, encouraging individuals to see beyond immediate circumstances to the long-term unfolding of the soul's journey. As we move toward exploring how his teachings can be internalized and lived in modern contexts, the crucifixion and resurrection serve as foundational pillars. They reveal the transformative power of love enacted through presence, sacrifice, and unwavering alignment with divine intent. The energy that emanates from these moments is a living guide, illustrating that every act of conscious love contributes to the ongoing work of spiritual evolution. Through Cayce's lens, the story of Jesus' final days is not a static historical account, but a dynamic teaching on the integration of human and divine and the practical embodiment of love in all its forms. It is a template, a mirror, and an invitation for every seeker to recognize the potential for sacred alignment in their own journey. Emerging from the profound lessons of the crucifixion and resurrection, Cayce directs attention to the enduring influence of Jesus' teachings on the spiritual evolution of humanity. While his life and acts were historically anchored in first-century Palestine, the essence of his message transcends time and culture, offering a blueprint for living that harmonizes human experience with divine intention. Cayce emphasizes that the principles Jesus embodied, unconditional love, forgiveness, compassion, and selfless service, are accessible to every soul, regardless of religious affiliation, and are central to the maturation of the human spirit. Cayce often describes Jesus as a model for a universal spiritual path, one that requires balance, awareness, and deliberate practice. The reading suggests that his life demonstrates the integration of moral discipline with the profound capacities of the soul, showing that enlightenment is not merely contemplative, but actively lived. In this sense, Jesus becomes a mirror reflecting the latent potential within each individual, revealing the heights that can be reached when human nature and divine purpose are perfectly aligned. His journey underscores that spiritual mastery is neither theoretical nor distant. It is practical, attainable, and observable in everyday choices. The readings also reveal the subtle, often overlooked layers of Jesus' interactions. From a Cayce perspective, each encounter, conversation, or corrective action was infused with intention designed to awaken the latent consciousness of those present, as well as future generations. He engaged with humanity in a manner that encouraged self-reflection and growth, using narrative, symbolism, and example rather than coercion. In modern terms, this approach illustrates a method of spiritual influence grounded in respect, subtlety, and empowerment, emphasizing that the highest form of teaching is the one that allows others to discover truth within themselves. Central to this teaching is the concept of alignment, living in harmony with divine law while navigating the complexities of human society. Cayce asserts that Jesus' parables, miracles, and ethical demonstrations were all practical lessons in alignment, offering models for how to act ethically, respond with love, and maintain spiritual integrity even in the face of misunderstanding or opposition. The readings encourage listeners to see life's challenges as opportunities for practicing alignment, turning adversity into a catalyst for conscious development, and viewing others not as obstacles but as mirrors for inner growth. Cayce also highlights the relational aspect of Jesus' path. The readings consistently stress the importance of community, mentorship, and shared responsibility. Jesus' life was intertwined with disciples, followers, and skeptics alike, illustrating the dynamics of influence, patience, and leadership. His capacity to engage with diverse individuals with empathy and clarity reflects a model for interpersonal conduct that fosters spiritual expansion. Every teaching moment in his life carried both an internal message for the disciple and an external lesson for the wider community, emphasizing that spiritual development is both personal and collective. Another critical dimension in Cayce's interpretation is the role of forgiveness and reconciliation. Jesus' ability to forgive, not superficially, but from a place of deep understanding and compassion, serves as a core template for spiritual maturity. Cayce suggests that the act of forgiveness is less about the one being forgiven and more about liberating the forgiver, allowing them to transcend ego-driven limitations and experience the fullness of love. This perspective reframes human conflicts and grievances as exercises in self-realization, demonstrating that the path of Christ is deeply practical and universally relevant. In addition, Cayce illuminates the metaphysical significance of Jesus' actions. Each healing, each moment of profound insight was not simply an event within the physical realm, but a reflection of spiritual law in motion. These manifestations of divine principle offer tangible evidence of the potential inherent in harmonizing the human will with higher consciousness. They exemplify the mechanics of energy, intention, and spiritual resonance, teaching that spiritual truth can manifest materially when aligned with purpose and integrity. Practical application in daily life emerges as a recurring theme. Cayce encourages listeners to emulate Jesus, not through imitation alone, but through internalization, adopting his qualities of patience, discernment, compassion, and integrity in every decision. By doing so, one participates actively in the ongoing work of spiritual evolution, becoming a conduit for the same principles that guided Jesus. This approach transforms spiritual aspiration into a lived reality, demonstrating that every act, no matter how mundane, carries the potential for sacred significance. Ultimately, Cayce portrays Jesus' influence as an invitation to each soul to awaken its inherent divine potential. His life provides a framework for understanding how human experience, when consciously navigated, can reflect the highest principles of love and unity. By studying his journey through the lens of multiple lifetimes, as Cayce emphasizes, one gains insight into the persistent cultivation required for spiritual maturation and the universal applicability of these lessons. As we prepare to delve deeper into how these principles extend into practical, modern living, and the ways in which individuals can embody this divine human synthesis, it becomes clear that Jesus' role, as revealed through Cayce, is both exemplary and instructive, a living map for every soul seeking integration and purpose. Following the profound insights into Jesus' life and teachings, Cayce's readings explore the notion of spiritual succession, how the principles he embodied continue to ripple through generations, shaping the evolution of human consciousness. Cayce emphasizes that the influence of Jesus is not static, confined to historical documentation, or solely within the walls of organized religion. Instead, it operates dynamically within every heart willing to engage with love, service, and ethical living. His presence is a living, guiding force accessible through introspection, meditation, and the deliberate cultivation of virtues such as empathy, patience, and forgiveness. Cayce frames the understanding of Jesus' life as part of a continuum that spans multiple incarnations. Each previous lifetime, as outlined in the readings, contributes to the wisdom, moral clarity, and spiritual authority witnessed in his public ministry. By tracing these lifetimes, listeners can appreciate the notion that mastery is a gradual, accumulative process. Every act, every choice, every internal struggle across centuries of existence became foundational in creating a life that exemplifies divine human integration. The readings encourage the audience to reflect on their own spiritual journey, understanding that growth and maturity require persistent effort, reflection, and ethical alignment. Within this framework, Cayce highlights the practical implications for contemporary life. Jesus' teachings, when interpreted through this lens, serve not only as moral imperatives, but as actionable strategies for daily conduct. Love becomes an active force, demonstrated through tangible acts of kindness, assistance to those in need, and consistent ethical choices. Forgiveness is reimagined as a transformative process that frees the individual from attachment to past grievances. Compassion extends beyond emotional sentiment, inviting engagement with the world through discernment and intentional service. Cayce's readings transform abstract ideals into a blueprint for living, offering listeners a methodology for embodying the very principles that Jesus manifested. A striking aspect of Cayce's perspective is the emphasis on the universality of Jesus' teachings. Though his historical context was deeply rooted in Judaic traditions, the spiritual principles he enacted resonate across cultures and epochs. Cayce reiterates that these lessons are not exclusive to any single religious tradition. Instead, they embody universal truths accessible to every person, regardless of creed or cultural background. By framing the teachings in this way, Cayce encourages openness, humility, and a recognition of shared spiritual inheritance, inviting humanity to view the journey of the soul through a lens of interconnectedness rather than division. Cayce further explores the integration of divine and human aspects within Jesus as a model for personal development. The reading suggests that every individual carries latent divine potential, and that conscious effort is required to harmonize this with the human experience. Through reflection, meditation, prayer, and ethical practice, one can gradually emulate the balance Jesus achieved, cultivating wisdom, love, and resilience. The emphasis is on internal transformation rather than external validation, highlighting that the true measure of spiritual maturity is how one embodies principles in everyday life, even in the absence of recognition or reward. Moreover, Cayce delves into the metaphysical dimension of Jesus' influence, portraying him as a conduit through which higher consciousness interacts with humanity. This perspective frames miracles, teachings, and parables as manifestations of universal spiritual laws, evidence of how intention, alignment, and clarity of purpose can create tangible outcomes. By understanding these events as reflections of divine principle in action, listeners gain a practical framework for interpreting their own experiences. Every decision, every interaction, every moment of moral choice becomes an opportunity to engage with the sacred, reflecting the same principles that guided Jesus' actions. The readings also highlight the social dimension of spiritual practice. Jesus' life exemplifies leadership, mentorship, and compassionate engagement with community. Cayce emphasizes that spiritual growth is not solely individualistic. It flourishes in relationships, shared experiences, and service. By nurturing connections, offering guidance, and fostering understanding, one participates in the perpetuation of spiritual evolution, extending the impact of divine principles across time and space. In this way, the legacy of Jesus becomes a living tradition, not confined to texts or rituals, but continually renewed through the actions of those who embody his teachings. In practical terms, Cayce urges an active engagement with the spiritual path. Reflection, self-examination, and conscious practice are essential for the integration of divine qualities. The readings illustrate that growth is iterative, requiring patience, humility, and consistent effort. As Jesus' life demonstrates, mastery is not instantaneous, but emerges through the cumulative effect of deliberate, ethically grounded actions. By aligning intention with moral action, one gradually cultivates the inner harmony that mirrors the divine human synthesis exemplified by Christ. In conclusion, Cayce presents Jesus' influence as both timeless and accessible, a continuous invitation for humanity to engage deeply with love, service, and ethical living. His life, spanning multiple incarnations, provides a model for the integration of divine principles within the human experience, demonstrating that spiritual evolution is both attainable and practical. As we transition to the subsequent exploration of how these lessons manifest in contemporary human experience and personal spiritual practice, it becomes evident that the essence of Jesus' message is alive, guiding each soul toward alignment, compassion, and the realization of their highest potential. As the narrative unfolds, Cayce's readings draw attention to the subtle interplay between human perception and spiritual truth. He emphasizes that understanding Jesus' life and teachings is not a matter of passive observation, but active engagement. Each parable, miracle, and interaction is layered with meaning, offering a lens through which listeners can examine their own lives. The readings suggest that spiritual insight is cultivated not merely by study, but by contemplation, application, and the willingness to perceive beyond the surface of historical events. Jesus, in Cayce's interpretation, becomes a mirror reflecting the potential for divine human integration within every individual. Cayce also addresses the preparatory nature of Jesus' prior incarnations, illustrating that each life provided incremental lessons in compassion, discernment, and ethical action. These experiences equipped him with the ability to respond with wisdom and love in moments of profound challenge during his final earthly ministry. By presenting Jesus as a soul refined through successive lifetimes, Cayce underscores a universal principle. Spiritual mastery emerges from cumulative experience. Listeners are invited to reflect on their own journey, recognizing that growth is a gradual, iterative process. Every challenge, every moral decision, every moment of reflection contributes to the shaping of a life aligned with divine purpose. In examining the miracles attributed to Jesus, Cayce provides an interpretive framework that transcends literalist readings. Rather than viewing these events solely as supernatural acts, the readings suggest that they are manifestations of universal spiritual laws at work. Healing, transformation, and restoration are depicted as the natural outcomes of alignment with higher consciousness, intention, and ethical clarity. By understanding these principles, listeners can begin to recognize the potential for similar transformative influence in their own lives, emphasizing that the divine is not remote, but accessible through conscious practice and alignment. Furthermore, Cayce highlights the moral and ethical dimensions of Jesus' teachings, illustrating how they provide practical guidance for daily living. Love, forgiveness, patience, and humility are not abstract virtues, but actionable principles that shape behavior and decision-making. By embodying these qualities, individuals participate in the ongoing unfolding of spiritual evolution. Cayce's readings suggest that the true measure of discipleship is not ritual observance, but the consistent practice of these principles, demonstrating their relevance across time, culture, and circumstance. The readings also explore the relational aspect of spiritual development. Jesus' interactions with his followers, skeptics, and opponents offer insights into the dynamics of teaching, mentorship, and leadership. Cayce emphasizes that spiritual growth is inherently relational, involving empathy, guidance, and the capacity to inspire ethical action in others. By engaging with others in ways that reflect divine principles, individuals amplify the impact of spiritual truth, creating ripples of influence that extend beyond personal experience. Cayce further notes the universality of Jesus' message, asserting that its core principles resonate across cultures, religions, and epochs. The emphasis on love, compassion, and ethical alignment transcends doctrinal boundaries, offering a path toward unity and understanding. This perspective invites listeners to approach spiritual study with humility and openness, recognizing the shared human quest for meaning and moral integrity. By appreciating the universality of these teachings, one fosters a sense of interconnectedness and collective responsibility in the spiritual journey. Additionally, the readings stress the importance of intentionality in spiritual practice. Cayce encourages listeners to engage with reflection, meditation, and prayer not as mere ritual, but as purposeful acts that cultivate awareness, clarity, and alignment. Through deliberate focus on ethical action and conscious thought, individuals activate the latent potential within themselves, gradually embodying the qualities exemplified by Jesus. This intentional practice transforms ordinary experiences into opportunities for growth, reinforcing the principle that spiritual evolution is a lived, active process. Cayce's perspective also underscores the integration of the inner and outer life. Ethical conduct, moral decision-making, and spiritual awareness are inseparable from daily actions, relationships, and societal engagement. By applying the principles of love, forgiveness, and compassion in tangible ways, individuals create environments that support spiritual growth and community well-being. The readings emphasize that personal transformation is inseparable from the broader context of human interaction, reinforcing the interconnected nature of existence. In essence, Section 11 illuminates the continuous relevance of Jesus' teachings, interpreted through Cayce's lens as a guide for ethical living, relational integrity, and spiritual maturation. Each listener is invited to perceive the subtle lessons embedded within his life, translating them into practical, actionable wisdom. The readings reveal that the spiritual path is dynamic, relational, and deeply personal, yet universally accessible, providing a roadmap for integrating divine principles into everyday life. As we transition to the subsequent exploration of Jesus' ethical leadership and the cultivation of spiritual authority in human affairs, it becomes clear that Cayce's insights offer both inspiration and practical guidance for the ongoing journey of the soul. The focus now shifts to the ethical and spiritual leadership that Jesus embodied, a model that, according to Cayce, is attainable in principle by every soul striving for harmony between the divine and human aspects. Cayce's readings emphasize that Jesus' leadership was rooted not in power, coercion, or social position, but in integrity, compassion, and unwavering alignment with higher principles. This type of leadership emanates naturally from those who have cultivated self-mastery and a deep understanding of ethical and spiritual laws. Listeners are encouraged to consider how leadership in daily life, whether in families, communities, or workplaces, can reflect these same principles, demonstrating influence through example rather than force. Cayce presents the notion that Jesus' miracles and teachings were, in essence, expressions of conscious alignment with universal laws. By acting from a place of love, clarity, and divine connection, Jesus demonstrated that moral authority is inseparable from spiritual maturity. The readings suggest that those who aspire to leadership in any form must first undertake an internal journey, cultivating virtues such as patience, humility, forgiveness, and discernment. By refining the inner life, individuals become channels through which divine principles can manifest in practical, tangible ways. This alignment transforms ordinary interactions into opportunities for healing, guidance, and inspiration. The readings also delve into the relational dynamics of Jesus' ministry, highlighting the importance of empathy, attentiveness, and active listening. Cayce emphasizes that true spiritual leadership requires understanding the needs, fears, and potential of others. Jesus' responses to the marginalized, the questioning, and the conflicted demonstrate a nuanced awareness that leadership involves both guidance and service. This dual approach, assertive in principle, yet compassionate in practice, forms a model for ethical engagement, illustrating that influence grows most effectively when rooted in care and respect for others' autonomy. Cayce further underscores the role of example in ethical development. Jesus' life, from his daily routines to his profound teachings, was a continuous demonstration of values, providing a living template for discipleship. Each decision, each interaction, and each act of kindness or forgiveness is depicted as intentional, conscious, and reflective of a broader spiritual understanding. Listeners are invited to perceive their own lives as similarly potent instruments. Choices made with awareness and compassion ripple outward, influencing relationships, communities, and even the trajectory of collective consciousness. The readings illuminate the interplay between challenge and spiritual growth. Jesus encountered opposition, skepticism, and even betrayal, yet these circumstances served as catalysts for demonstrating unwavering commitment to principles of love and truth. Cayce interprets these experiences as vital to the development of character and the demonstration of spiritual authority in action. This perspective encourages listeners to reframe adversity, not as a setback, but as an opportunity to embody higher values, fostering resilience and deepening spiritual understanding through lived experience. Central to this understanding is the concept that spiritual authority is inseparable from personal accountability. Cayce emphasizes that Jesus never sought external validation or worldly recognition. His authority was grounded entirely in fidelity to divine principles and clarity of purpose. For those seeking to cultivate similar influence, The readings advocate for a conscious life of integrity, where ethical considerations guide choices and actions rather than social approval or convenience. By internalizing this principle, individuals transform personal responsibility into a mechanism for spiritual influence, cultivating respect and inspiration naturally rather than through imposition. Cayce's readings also explore the alignment of thought, word, and deed. Jesus' teachings and actions were consistently congruent, demonstrating that authenticity is essential for effective spiritual leadership. Discrepancies between internal understanding and external behavior weaken influence, while alignment strengthens it, creating a coherence that resonates with others on subtle, often subconscious levels. Listeners are reminded to examine their own lives for such coherence, striving to ensure that intentions, beliefs, and actions reflect the highest values they aspire to embody. The readings further highlight the role of love as both foundation and motivator in leadership. Cayce portrays Jesus' choices as consistently guided by a profound, inclusive love that transcends preference, bias, and fear. This love fosters trust, inspires ethical behavior in others, and serves as a connective force that unites diverse individuals and communities. By adopting a similar approach, listeners can cultivate influence that is enduring, constructive, and deeply rooted in the principles of divine human harmony. As Section 12 concludes, the emphasis is on the practical application of Jesus' model of leadership in contemporary life. Cayce's readings invite reflection on how ordinary actions, informed by spiritual awareness, can guide, inspire, and transform. Through integrity, empathy, coherence, and love, each individual has the capacity to exercise leadership that reflects the divine human integration exemplified by Jesus. The next section will explore the culmination of these principles in his ultimate mission of service, sacrifice, and embodiment of divine love, offering insights into the path every soul can take to mirror such integration. As the narrative draws closer to the apex of Jesus' earthly mission, Cayce's readings invite listeners to witness the culmination of his journey, a life lived as a seamless embodiment of divine purpose, culminating in acts of service, sacrifice, and transformative love. Here, the focus is not merely on historical events, but on the deeper spiritual architecture that underlies each moment of his ministry. Cayce emphasizes that Jesus' life represents a blueprint for the integration of human and divine faculties, offering guidance for those who seek to harmonize intellect, emotion, and soul in pursuit of higher ideals. The readings illuminate the significance of the crucifixion as both a literal and symbolic event. Cayce portrays it not solely as an historical occurrence, but as the apex of a multidimensional spiritual journey where love, forgiveness, and selflessness converge in a singular act of ultimate demonstration. This event illustrates the profound principle that personal sacrifice, when rooted in alignment with divine law, resonates far beyond the individual, shaping collective consciousness. Listeners are encouraged to perceive suffering and challenge not as punitive measures, but as opportunities for active expression of love and service, mirroring the conscious choices made by Jesus throughout his life. Cayce further explores the subtle layers of meaning in Jesus' miracles, parables, and teachings, showing that each was a vehicle for expressing higher spiritual truths in tangible, comprehensible forms. Water turned to wine, healing of the sick, feeding the multitudes. These were not mere acts of wonder, but expressions of principles accessible to the human heart and mind. Each narrative carries a template for how divine potential can manifest in the material world, underscoring the accessibility of these principles for every individual willing to align with love, integrity, and faith. Through these examples, the readings reinforce the notion that spiritual mastery is a lived, iterative process rather than a distant ideal. The readings highlight the human aspect of Jesus, reminding listeners that divine-human integration does not eliminate struggle or vulnerability, but transforms their meaning. Cayce often notes that Jesus experienced fear, doubt, and fatigue, yet consistently chose to act in accordance with divine guidance and love. These examples illustrate that the path to spiritual integration is neither effortless nor linear. Listeners are invited to internalize this perspective, understanding that moments of human limitation are essential stages in the refinement of character, empathy, and conscious alignment with universal principles. Central to this section is the exploration of the principle of service as the highest expression of divine alignment. Cayce's readings emphasize that the essence of Jesus' mission was not simply teaching or performing miracles, but embodying love through action. Service becomes the conduit through which abstract virtues manifest in the world, transforming relationships and communities. Listeners are encouraged to reflect on the practical implications of this principle. Acts of compassion, ethical decision-making, and deliberate kindness are not peripheral to spiritual development. They are the very mechanism through which the soul cultivates and expresses its divine potential. Forgiveness, as a recurring theme in Jesus' teachings, receives special attention in Cayce's readings. The act of forgiving those who cause harm is depicted as a conscious choice, rooted in understanding the interconnectedness of all souls and the enduring nature of the soul's journey. By forgiving, individuals release themselves from cycles of resentment and open channels for higher wisdom and love to flow. Cayce underscores that this practice is foundational for anyone seeking to emulate Jesus' spiritual integration, transforming interpersonal conflict into opportunities for growth, healing, and demonstration of divine principles. Cayce also addresses the continuity of Jesus' life across multiple incarnations, suggesting that the lessons and virtues cultivated in earlier lives converge to allow him to fulfill his final mission with clarity and precision. Listeners are encouraged to contemplate their own spiritual journeys in this broader context. Every thought, choice, and action contributes to the gradual evolution of the soul, and understanding past patterns provides insight into present opportunities for growth. In this sense, the life of Jesus is not merely historical, it is archetypal, offering a mirror through which every individual can assess and refine their path toward divine human harmony. The readings weave together the theological, historical, and personal dimensions, presenting Jesus' life as both a story of the soul and a practical guide for living. Each action, parable, and interaction embodies principles that are as relevant today as they were 2 millennia ago. The crucifixion, resurrection, and post-resurrection teachings are reframed not just as religious events, but as illustrations of the ultimate integration of love, service, and spiritual mastery. Cayce's insights reveal that the power of Jesus' example lies in its replicable essence. It demonstrates what is possible when a soul consciously aligns with the highest ideals of divine human potential. As section 13 concludes, the listener is left with a sense of both reverence and empowerment. Jesus' life, as revealed through Cayce, is not distant or unattainable. It is a template for conscious living, for the integration of human vulnerability and divine potential in everyday existence. The narrative sets the stage for the final section, which will synthesize these teachings into actionable understanding. inviting reflection on the ongoing journey of love, service, and spiritual realization that each soul can undertake. In the final stages of Jesus' earthly mission, Cayce's readings guide us into a profound reflection on the enduring implications of his life, teachings, and choices for humanity's spiritual journey. This section emphasizes the practical application of divine-human integration, inviting listeners to internalize the principles Jesus embodied and consider how these can manifest in their own lives. Cayce consistently underscores that the essence of spiritual growth lies not in external ritual or dogma, but in the cultivation of love, compassion, forgiveness, and conscious alignment with divine truth, a journey accessible to all who sincerely seek it. Cayce portrays the resurrection not merely as a historical event, but as a living demonstration of transformation and continuity. It represents the ultimate proof of the soul's ability to transcend limitations, to embody the divine within the human experience, and to inspire generations beyond its immediate temporal existence. Listeners are encouraged to see in this event a template for personal resilience and spiritual renewal, reminding them that setbacks, suffering, and even profound loss can serve as catalysts for inner growth and deeper alignment with universal principles. This perspective reframes challenges as sacred opportunities to mirror the lessons of Jesus' life. Throughout the readings, Cayce highlights the universality of Jesus' message, emphasizing that it transcends denominational boundaries and cultural contexts. The core teachings, love, service, forgiveness, humility, are presented as timeless and universally accessible, applicable in every era and circumstance. Listeners are invited to move beyond literalist interpretations of Scripture and explore the underlying spiritual truths that unify humanity across faiths. In doing so, the life of Jesus becomes a bridge, connecting the divine with everyday human experience and providing a roadmap for cultivating the virtues that underpin a harmonious, conscious society. Cayce further explores the ongoing influence of Jesus' example on the evolution of human consciousness. Each act of kindness, each demonstration of ethical integrity, and each conscious choice aligned with love contributes to a collective awakening, gradually shaping the moral and spiritual landscape of the world. This notion reinforces the idea that spiritual practice is not isolated. Individual transformation ripples outward, influencing communities, cultures, and ultimately the global consciousness. Listeners are thus encouraged to approach their daily lives as arenas for embodying these principles, recognizing that small, consistent acts of love and service are cumulative forces of profound impact. The readings also emphasize that emulating Jesus' integration of human and divine qualities does not require perfection, but conscious effort, self-reflection, and incremental growth. Cayce reminds us that the journey toward spiritual mastery is lifelong, encompassing both triumphs and failures, and that every decision to act with love, patience, and integrity contributes to the unfolding of divine potential within. Listeners are invited to engage in this practice with humility and persistence, understanding that the cultivation of virtue is both the path and the goal, reflecting the harmonious interplay between divine guidance and human agency. Central to this final section is the practical embodiment of Jesus' core command: love one another as I have loved you. Cayce repeatedly underscores that love is not an abstract concept, but a tangible, lived principle, expressed through tangible actions, empathetic listening, and compassionate response to the needs of others. This teaching is universal, transcending religion, culture, and circumstance. Listeners are encouraged to integrate this principle into their interactions, viewing every moment as an opportunity to manifest divine love in real-world contexts, thereby continuing the work initiated by Jesus and illuminating the path for others to follow. Cayce's readings culminate in an invitation to perceive Jesus' life as both exemplar and mirror. His actions, choices, and spiritual integration offer a model for what is possible within the human experience when the soul consciously aligns with divine purpose. Each listener is encouraged to reflect on their own potential for embodying these principles, recognizing that the integration of human empathy and divine wisdom is accessible in every life, in every decision, and in every moment of conscious presence. The life of Jesus, as presented through Cayce, becomes a living map for personal and collective spiritual evolution. As section 14 draws to a close, the narrative gently leads the listener to contemplate their own place within this ongoing journey. Cayce's insights remind us that we are participants in a grand, unfolding tapestry of consciousness, where each soul has the opportunity to contribute to the flowering of love, understanding, and harmony in the world. The life of Jesus is not a distant story confined to history, but a continuously relevant guide, illuminating the path toward ethical, compassionate, and spiritually integrated living. By observing, internalizing, and applying these principles, listeners can participate in the sacred work of embodying divine love in tangible, meaningful ways. Through this lens, we understand that Jesus' mission, as revealed in Cayce's readings, is both universal and intimately personal. It challenges us to live with integrity, to forgive generously, to serve selflessly, and to love unconditionally. Each action becomes a reflection of the divine human potential within, offering both guidance and inspiration. The listener is left with a sense of sacred responsibility and empowerment. The journey of the soul is ongoing, and every conscious choice is a step toward greater alignment with divine truth. This conclusion prepares the listener to reflect on the totality of Jesus' life, his example across multiple incarnations, and the enduring invitation to embody his teachings in contemporary life. Edgar Cayce's readings offer a profound reinterpretation of Jesus' life, emphasizing the continuity of his spiritual evolution and the depth of his teachings as an exemplar for all humanity. Rather than viewing Jesus solely as a historical figure, Cayce invites listeners to recognize him as a living template for integrating divine wisdom and human experience. Every parable, miracle, and act of compassion is reframed as a practical lesson in spiritual mastery, illustrating that the principles Jesus embodied are universally accessible and applicable in daily life. Through Cayce's insights, we come to see that Jesus' mission was as much about revealing the potential within every soul as it was about transforming history. His life embodies the harmonious blending of human vulnerability and divine capacity, demonstrating that spiritual excellence is attainable through conscious choices, ethical action, and unwavering commitment to love. Each challenge he faced, each moment of suffering or triumph, is a microcosm of the broader spiritual journey accessible to all seekers. Listeners are reminded that the essence of spiritual practice lies not in ritual alone, but in active engagement with the world through love, service, and forgiveness. Acts of kindness, selfless service, and compassionate interaction with others are the tangible manifestations of the divine principles Jesus exemplified. In this sense, emulating Jesus does not require grand gestures or dramatic miracles, but consistent, conscious effort to embody love in every aspect of life. Cayce's readings also highlight the timeless and universal nature of Jesus' teachings. By transcending cultural, historical, and religious boundaries, they reveal that the path of love, compassion, and service is not confined to any one tradition. Instead, these principles form a unifying thread that links humanity to the divine, inviting listeners to perceive all life as interconnected and sacred. The invitation is clear. To follow Jesus is to actively cultivate the qualities he exemplified: love, empathy, forgiveness, humility, and service within one's own life. Each conscious choice to act in alignment with these principles contributes to personal growth and the upliftment of collective consciousness. The narrative encourages reflection on the continuity of the soul's journey, illustrating that the integration of divine human qualities is both attainable and deeply transformative. Finally, the conclusion leaves listeners with a lasting image, a luminous path stretching between heaven and earth, each soul moving forward, inspired by the example of Jesus and carrying the potential to manifest divine love in the world. The question posed gently invites self-inquiry. If he traveled across countless lives to embody perfect love, how will we respond in this lifetime? This reflection serves as a call to conscious living, inspiring each individual to embrace their own capacity for love, service, and spiritual integration, and to step into the world as a co-creator of harmony, compassion, and light.